Hello, smart people. How are you doing today? For those of you who are new to my channel, warm welcome. Thanks for dropping by. For those of you who know me already, thanks for coming back. It's great to have you here again. You know that I work as a German language teacher, and it really has nothing to do with German particularly. This is about learning languages in general. But today I would like to be talking a little bit about why people seem to be struggling so much with learning languages. People seem to be struggling particularly with learning German, but I'm quite sure it happens to everybody, anyone who tries to learn a language as a teenager or as an adult. And I would like to share some of my thoughts with you. Maybe some of you are going to find them interesting. I have the idea that this video is probably going to take a bit longer, so maybe just grab yourself a cup of tea, make yourselves comfortable, sit down, and if you would like to listen to me, you're very welcome. Most of my students, including myself as a student of other languages, make the experience that when you start learning a language, you usually advance rather quickly in the beginning. Yeah, that usually has a very motivating effect. You learn new concepts every single day. You recognize similarities with your native language or with other languages that you studied before, and you see the progress very quickly. Yeah, and then after a certain while, you realize that you seem to be slowing down. Yeah, the progress is not as steep anymore. Seems to be leveling out. And then nearly everyone I know experiences this plateau that takes shorter or longer for certain people. But everybody sooner or later comes to a plateau where they feel that they're no longer advancing in their German. They're feeling that they're treading on the spot, still putting in a lot of effort, but not really getting any further. And some even experience a decline. Yeah, they feel that they study, they keep studying, they keep putting in the work, and at the end of the day, they feel that they're losing their competence day by day, and they're actually falling behind. And that is an extremely frustrating feeling to have. I've had that feeling myself, and I know that many of my students do. And I would like to give you my thoughts on why that is. And I'm not a scientist, I'm not a specialist. I'm just a German teacher with well, quite a bit of teaching experience, and I have quite a bit of studying experience with languages. So this is just going to be my personal opinion. I cannot really support most of what I'm saying now with official studies, but I think you're going to recognize some of your own thoughts or ideas in what I'm going to be saying, and you're warmly invited to leave your feedback in the comments. You can write me emails in private. This is not about collecting comments. I can tell you, I would really like to know what you guys think about what I think. Because if I know what helps you and what causes you struggle, that is going to help me become a better teacher. And ultimately, that is my that's my ultimate goal in the end. So my thought is actually that learning and memory, because that's what it is. Yeah, learning is an increase in memory of a certain type of knowledge is a science. I truly believe that there is a scientific way behind things, which doesn't mean that it's the same for everybody. Yeah, science doesn't mean that there is a one size fits all solution, which you can see in nearly everything in life. Yeah, you see it in nutrition. There's a science around nutrition, which doesn't mean that every person on earth should be eating the exact same thing every single day or the exact same amount of things, because people have different different genes and genetic background. They have different body height, male, female, body composition, environment, so many factors influencing it. Yeah, it doesn't mean that everybody should be eating the same thing every day, but nonetheless, it is a science of what effect nutrition can have on your body. And just as much, I believe that language learning and memory as a whole is a science that we're just about beginning to discover. And I know there are quite a few memory gurus out there, whom I don't want to mention because I've never really watched much of what they're saying, so I can't have a judgment on that or an opinion on that. But I know that people are just about discovering what science there is behind memory. And my experience is really very much limited to language learning. So I would like to suggest a metaphor to you, which I think describes the struggle people have with language learning best. And that is the metaphor of someone who wants to become a bodybuilder. Yeah. You would like to work on your physical composition in order to achieve a certain goal. Yeah, increasing your muscle mass or being able to lift a certain amount of weight. It's really just meant to be a picture for you to compare what I'm trying to say. You want to increase your muscles in order to look a certain way, yeah, and to have a certain amount of strength. And learning a language is pretty much just that. Yeah, you're talking about adults only. Yeah, I'm not talking about children because I don't have enough experience with children, and children really do learn in a very different way. But if you start learning a language as an adult, you have already reached your language set point, as I believe it. Yeah, just as everyone who's beyond the age of 20 has probably reached their final height, yeah, body height, and has a certain uh, stature, yeah, a certain physical body composition that every person usually can only change with quite a bit of effort. Yeah, you have a set point in your body and you have a set point in your language. And if you want to move away from that, you want to increase that, it normally takes a huge amount of work. And the frustrating thing is that you can't just split up the amount of work you have to do and just do it whenever it fits, because if you stop doing it for a while, you're going to lose it again. Yeah, everyone who ever tried to to go to the gym and increase your strength has experienced that if you don't do it for a month, you can start all over again. And I think it's not hard to see how that resembles language learning. So in the end, scientifically speaking, we're trying to maximize the input, let's say vocabulary or grammar knowledge that we're putting into our heads, while at the same time trying to optimize our processing, yeah, to make the best possible use of the input that we get, to retain as much of it as we can, and at the same time minimizing the loss, yeah, the loss in muscle mass, the loss in memory. I really think brain and muscle is just about the same thing. Yeah, you can increase the amount of your brain cells just as much as you can increase the amount of your muscle cells. And I'm not talking about biological perspective. I'm talking about a metaphorical perspective, as I mentioned. You can train your brain and you will increase the amount of cells, of brain cells that you have that contain language knowledge. If you train your right arm only, you're not going to gain strength in your left arm. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. You're going to train, or you're going to increase what you train. Yeah. So if you want to increase your vocabulary knowledge, it doesn't really make much sense to study a grammar book, and vice versa. Yeah. You might accidentally pick up a few things here and there, happens to people, but you want to be very thoughtful and selective with the input you put into your brain because you can't memorize all of it. Now, the reason why after a certain while people experience this plateau, I think is a pure matter of calculation. So let's say a person structures their learning journey. Yeah, they make themselves a plan. I'm going to be studying 10 words per day for the next year. Yeah, so they calculate, okay, 10 words per day. Let's say they skip the weekends, so it's going to be 50 words per week times, let's say, 50 weeks in a year because you're going to go on holiday. 50 words times 50 weeks. So you assume at the end of that year, you're going to have a vocabulary, an active vocabulary of 2,500 items, which should theoretically give you a solid, well, a good enough B1 level, yeah, in German or any other language. And then at the end of the year, they look at what they actually achieved, although they did what they set themselves to do, and wonder, okay, am I stupid? Did I do something wrong? Is something wrong with my brain? Am I just too old to study? Am I just too dumb to do it? Yeah, people start doubting themselves because the calculation just doesn't add up. And I think people forget some very, very important variables that I would like to show you with a mathematical equation. Okay, so let's start by week number 1. You learn 50 words in week number 1. Okay, are you actually going to memorize all 50 of them? I think most people will lose, and now I don't have scientific facts to back up the percentage that I'm saying, but just for the matter of calculation, I would like to say on average, a person is going to lose 20% of what they learned in a week because the knowledge is still very new. Yeah, it's still very fresh. Maybe it's even going to be 30%. So at the end of that week, you will have lost 20% of what you learned. You will have remembered 40 words out of the 50 words that you studied. Yeah. So on top of those 40 words, you're now going to add 50 new words that you study in week 2. which should actually give you 90 words by the end of week 2. But out of those 90, you're still going to forget about 20%. Yeah, you're going to forget 18 words out of those 90 that you studied since you started. So in week 3, instead of adding 50 new words on top, 18 out of those 50 words will be words that you forgot in the previous weeks. So you will only have a capacity of adding 32 new words on top, etc., 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 etc. And after a certain while, yeah, if you continue the calculation, you will see that by a certain time, you will only add about as many words as you forget. And that is why people experience a plateau. Yeah, they keep adding at the same pace, at the same speed as they did before, but the knowledge that they accumulated until then is much larger than in the beginning. And still, they're going to be forgetting a part of it every single day, every single week. Yeah. So with the same amount of work that they put in that they have put in the beginning, and that gave them very nice results at first, they are later only going to be able to maintain the amount of knowledge that they have accumulated. And then if you slip for a moment, yeah, you go on a vacation, you don't study for a month, that happens to most of us, yeah, you're going to lose. And then when you come back next time, you set yourself to study again, you will need to regain what you lost in that month. You have lost your momentum, you have maybe lost a bit of your motivation, you have become frustrated, realizing that you forget at a faster pace than you study. And that is the reason why the vast majority of people usually drop out at an advanced A2 level. Yeah, if you're familiar with the framework A1, A2, B1, B2, and rarely people ever reach the C levels, because the plateau usually hits them much earlier, and people don't really have experience or have an idea about how to handle that, how to deal with that situation, because as I said, most people think it's their own fault because there's something wrong with them, wrong with their method, with their brain, with themselves, with their intelligence. They start doubting themselves and they drop out about A2. And a very small percentage really push through beyond that. And you can't blame people for that because it's a huge amount of effort and work you need to put in. And the success or failure that you have are very closely tied to people's perception of themselves. Yeah, happens to me too. I feel very good about myself when I feel I'm advancing in something that I'm trying to achieve. And I also feel very uncomfortable in my own skin if I feel I'm failing at something that I shouldn't be failing at. Yeah. So now people try, or we can or should try, if we want to go beyond that plateau, to play around with certain variables. Yeah. And that is what I would like to talk about or to share my thoughts about in the second half of this video. Because I would like to encourage you to share your advice. Not only with me, as I said, you can do that in private. You can write me an email. You will find it in the info box below, or you can share it with everyone. And if there are I'm sure there are going to be interesting thoughts that you guys have. I can make more videos about certain aspects that you would like me to talk more about or to give my opinion on. So let me actually share my opinion on what it is that we can do about it. Yeah, because one option certainly is to just give up. Yeah, maybe even don't even start studying a language because you know you're never going to go beyond A2, B1. Or we can try to work on our strategy. Yeah, and strategy is just as personal as nutrition is. There's no one size fits all strategy. I, as a teacher, have a certain strategy of teaching that I feel fits my style best, yeah, or that I have made the best experience with regard to my students and their learning outcome. But your solution can look very different from mine. But what I usually recommend those of my students who feel frustrated is that experiment with timing and with frequency. Yeah. And again, I would like to compare it to building muscle mass. If you go to the gym once a month and you hustle from machine to machine for 8 hours in a row, do you think that's going to get you the results that you want? Most likely not. You're actually even going to destroy your muscle mass if you do that. You won't be able to lift any more after maybe 2 or 3 hours, and that's intense already. Yeah. So how you spend those 8 hours in the course of a month really does matter. Now, first of all, 8 hours of language learning in a month is really not much. It is definitely not going to get you far. You get what I mean, yeah? Train 30 minutes or an hour every single day. Get yourselves a break every 2 or 3 days. Yeah, go to the gym four times in a week and train for an hour or 90 minutes. That is usually much better than sitting down at the weekend. Now I'm talking about studying, yeah, and cram for 8 hours in a row and then wonder why you forgot nearly all of it by next Friday. Yeah. So timing matters. Frequency matters. How often do you repeat what you learned? Or do you just continue where you left off seamlessly? Yeah. Because normally we will need to go over new concepts that we learned just recently much more than just once. But I'm guilty of that myself. I finished chapter 1 of a book. So next time I open the book, I'm going to be reading from chapter number 2. Although I know I should actually be repeating chapter number 1. But it's not new anymore. It's not exciting. It's not interesting. It has just become work. And that's why many people don't do it. Yeah. So we're going to be losing most of what we learned in chapter 1 by the time we start chapter 2. And now if you abstract that to people's language learning journey when attending courses, yeah, people will sit through a language learning course, a German course, A1 level, let's say, yeah. And by the time they finish that, nobody's going to touch their notes again. Most people I know would never say, "No, I'm gonna restudy everything I learned in A1." What they do is they sign up straight for A2, yeah. And then they feel that, okay, at the beginning of A2, oh, this is tense, this is tense, this is getting much more difficult than I expected. And they feel they have gaps. There are gaps in what they learned, and they should be closing those gaps, but they don't have the time because there's new content coming in every single week. The content of A2 is much more heavy than of A1, and same for B1. You're going to see if you're in the middle of acquiring new knowledge, you don't have the time or leisure to take care of repeating the old knowledge. Yeah. And people usually push through A1, A2, sometimes B1, and at the end of B1, they feel that they don't even know how to conjugate an irregular verb properly because they never took the time to repeat it. And then they start doubting, yeah, what did I do wrong? Should I sign up for B2 now, or should I just keep studying by myself? They feel embarrassed. And nobody wants to take a course twice. Although there's really absolutely no shame in attending a course twice. You can't expect your brain to remember and retain everything you learn by just sitting through a course once, especially if you expect that just by hearing the content, by having someone explain the content to you, your brain is going to memorize it. Oftentimes it goes in here and out there 10 seconds later. For me, definitely that's the case. And I can see that when my students ask me a question 2 or 3 times, 12 or 13 times, that it would make so much more sense to sit down and repeat something of what they studied before. Some people perform better in a classroom setting than in self-study. I think the reason for that largely is that there's someone, in this case the teacher, putting a little bit of pressure on them. Yeah. And of course, if you're an adult and you're attending a class, the teacher doesn't really have anything to pressure you with. But people's expectations is a huge source of pressure. Yeah, you have peer pressure by people attending the course with you because you don't want to be looked at as someone who, he's stupid, he doesn't know, he didn't study. Yeah. People put pressure on themselves, and the expectations of a teacher who's going to check your homework, who's going to do quizzes with you, who's going to expect you to talk, exerts just the right kind and amount of pressure for people to actually sit down and study and to do it regularly and to do homework and to revise and repeat concepts. And if you study on your own by yourself, you normally don't do that. You don't have anyone checking on you unless you made a bet with your friends that by the end of next year I'm going to pass Goethe A1 or Goethe A2, whatever it is that you're studying. Yeah, then that's also some kind of pressure. But if there's no one except for you and your book, who's going to check? Yeah, and then I certainly know that I need that amount of pressure, or someone being interested in my success and telling me, oh, you should be repeating that. Why don't you study that again? It's really not a criticism that should discourage you. It's a source of input from someone who's not you. Very, very valuable source of input, in my opinion. Then, of course, people try to vary the input channels that they use. Yeah? Maybe they studied with a textbook first and feel it doesn't work. And they try to change the method. They start watching movies on Netflix, or they start watching YouTube tutorials, or they start reading books and then hope that by changing the way that they learn, they're going to retain more. And after a while, you're going to find that your way of learning is very different from other people's. I love studying with textbooks. I love that they present language in a very structured, usually, very structured, logically sequenced, yeah, logically sequenced portions, that I can just take in and digest and then repeat after a while. I like that form of study. But other people get very bored by that. They want to see language in context. I understand that. Yeah, you watch a movie, you find the plot very interesting, so the movie has some certain relevance to you, and you're going to remember expressions or words if your memory is linked to the memory of the movie. Yeah, because memories need to attach to something. There's no brain cell, not a single cell in your brain that has no connection to other cells. And the stronger the connections are, the longer lasting your memory is going to be. And if you form better connections by learning vocabulary in a story, why not do that? Other people form stronger memories by attaching new knowledge to concepts. Yeah, I'm a very conceptual thinker. I need to be studying visually with overviews and tables and rules and colors and highlighting, that kind of stuff. But maybe you study best by listening. Find a nice podcast for you. Experiment. Yeah, don't trust what somebody else tells you to do, that this is the one and only and best way to learn, because there really is none. And then lastly, people try to reduce the amount of words that they forget. Yeah. How can you best do that? Get a solid amount of sleep. Yeah. Or maybe if you try to study right before sleeping or review your vocabulary list right before sleeping, you might have better success at retaining what you learned. I certainly have made the experience that I memorize words better if I studied them right before going to bed, or I repeated them right before going to bed, or have meaningful conversations with people who are native speakers. Because if I find it difficult to have conversations with others who are also just learning the language, because you tend to copy other people's mistakes and they don't correct yours because they don't realize it's wrong. And then I feel you have this multiplying effect of learning from other people's mistakes, which is a great pity. So try to find yourself a native speaker to practice with, to practice meaningful conversations in order to reduce the amount of words that you forget by increasing the amount of connections that you have. Yeah, you learned it in a story first, later you read it in a book, then you heard it in a movie, and then you used the word in a conversation with your friend. I can tell you that this memory is going to last so much longer than having just a rigid vocabulary list that you study from top to bottom every single evening. Now, those are just a few of my thoughts, and there's certainly so much more to talk about. As I said, I don't consider this video complete, and I don't consider it an expert video. Yeah, I'm just a language teacher. I'm not a memory or a brain expert. Unfortunately, I'm not, but I would like to be one day. So I really, really invite you and encourage you to tell me what you think about what I said or about what I left out, where you disagree with me, what experience you made with your difficulties, how you pushed through them. Maybe you gave up and you want to tell people why. Yeah, nobody's going to judge you for that. I'm not going to judge anybody for anything. But I want to know your experience, and I would like to make them the topic of a series of my videos. Yeah, so feel free to write me in the comments or in a private email. I hope you found it somewhat interesting what I had to say. And yeah, if you would like to hear more or have certain questions, feel free to ask anytime. I hope you're going to come back to my channel soon. And yeah, maybe see you then. Thank you, everyone. Bis dann. Tschüss.